The news right now is absolutely explosive, and you're about to see why the Republican Party is collapsing. First, 20 Republican Congress members are preparing to break away from Trump, triggering the biggest internal crisis in years. Then, Marjorie Taylor Greene finally breaks her silence and exposes dark secrets that Trump tried to hide before his departure. And to top it off, the most shocking revelation of the day emerges. Trump panicked, and the reason has just been exposed by the media. Leave a like and subscribe now.
20 Republican Congress members are abandoning Donald Trump. When I look at what's happening right now within the Republican Party, the feeling is that we are witnessing not just an internal crisis, but the beginning of a real collapse. A collapse caused by Donald Trump and sustained by years of blind allegiance to the MAGA movement. And I say this as someone who has followed politics for decades. I have never seen a party so dominated by fear, so paralyzed by toxic loyalties, so emptied of moral courage. The news you are about to see today isn't just another headline. It is a symptom of the disease that has overtaken the GOP. According to Puck News, which obtained exclusive information directly from Republican aides, more than 20 Republican Congress members are about to announce their resignation. 20, not one or two dissatisfied members. A mass exodus. And we're not talking about moderate Republicans or Trump critics. No, most are names who defended the president tooth and nail, who voted with him, who echoed his speeches and conspiracy theories in 2020. Now, about to abandon ship, they admit behind the scenes that everything has collapsed. And why is this happening? Because these lawmakers know that the political environment inside the party has become unsustainable. They entered Congress to legislate, but have become hostages to a single man. Some openly say, still behind the scenes, that their role has boiled down to one thing: defending Donald Trump. Not defending public policy, not defending their states, not defending the average citizen. Defending Trump, a leader who, year after year, demonstrates increasing contempt for his own allies, for democracy, and for the dignity of the office he held. Meanwhile, the electoral landscape for Republicans has become a perfect storm. Trump's approval is falling in virtually all national polls. Election results in Virginia, New Jersey, and Georgia have exposed a clear weakening of the conservative movement. Even special elections, like in the 7th District, where a pro-Trump candidate won by a tiny margin, have alarmed Republicans themselves. The message is clear. Voters are tired of chaos, extremism, and lack of direction. And there's another point that cannot be ignored. The economy is showing warning signs. Recent figures show that layoffs in the U.S. have increased by 40 to 54% compared to last year, totaling over 1.1 million. If projections hold, we could reach nearly 2 million layoffs in a single year. This directly affects the average worker, especially those living paycheck to paycheck. And it's precisely at this point that some Republican Congress members began to rebel. One of them is Brian Fitzpatrick, who publicly acknowledges that the central issue for Americans today is economic accessibility, cost of living, health, housing. He clearly states that the party is not addressing this issue. Worse, Trump himself mocked the topic, calling the crisis a Democrat hoax. How can anyone defend this in front of an entire country struggling to pay bills? How can this negligence be justified while millions lose jobs or face rising inflation? Now, it's here, roughly at this point, that we reach the main point of the news, and it's devastating. Because this is not just about dissatisfaction or political wear and tear. What's happening now within the Republican Party is something much deeper and more dangerous. After weeks of internal reports, the truth has emerged. These more than 20 Republican Congress members are preparing coordinated resignations because they believe the party leadership, Mike Johnson and Donald Trump, are leading the GOP straight to the abyss and possibly handing the House of Representatives to the Democrats even before the next elections. Yes, that's right. They fear that a wave of resignations could topple the Republican majority now, not in November, not in the next cycle, but in the coming weeks. And this fear is not unfounded. With the razor-thin margin in the House, just 2 or 3 departures could topple Johnson's majority. If that happens, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries could become the new Speaker of the House ahead of schedule. The Republican Party knows this, and Trump knows this. And that's exactly why both he and Mike Johnson are panicking. A silent panic, of course, because admitting weakness has never been part of the MAGA strategy. This news, loaded with internal information, strategic leaks, and clear signs of collapse, shows something many already suspected, but few dared to say aloud. Donald Trump is destroying the Republican Party from within, and this is just the first part of the story.
When we look at this approaching Republican exodus, it's clear that we are not talking about a spontaneous movement, but an accumulation of years of emotional, political, and institutional wear and tear. Many of these lawmakers have lived inside Congress what the public only sees superficially: the constant fear of internal retaliation, the psychological pressure to align with extremism, and the growing sense that the Republican Party has become an extension of one man's will, Donald Trump. And this man, contrary to what his followers believe, has no commitment to the party's future, much less the country's. This second part must start with an uncomfortable truth that many journalists have been hinting at behind the scenes. The MAGA movement does not exist to strengthen the Republican Party, it exists to strengthen Trump. This difference may seem subtle, but within Congress it is enormous. Because when decisions need to be made for the country, Trump demands decisions that protect him personally. When the party needs institutional stability, Trump demands public loyalty. And when the country faces real crises, such as rising layoffs or falling Social Security guarantees, Trump simply calls it all a media invention and moves on. It is in this toxic environment that many of these Congress members have lived since 2017. The last straw for several of them, according to an aide cited by Puck News, was realizing that the party no longer has a political project, it only has Trump's self-defense project. And this is reflected directly in votes, legislative agendas, and even internal meetings, which often become arenas of conflict between Republicans who still defend some sense of institutional integrity and Republicans who respond only to Trump, fearing social media attacks from him. But to truly understand the severity of the situation, we need to observe how Trump reacted internally when he learned of the possibility of mass resignations. He entered classic mode, panic masked as aggression. According to reports leaked by members close to Republican leadership, Trump personally pressured representatives already considering resignation, threatening to destroy their careers and calling some of them traitors. This reveals something many try to ignore. Trump has no problem attacking his own party if it means protecting his image. And this desperate reaction is only a sign of what's to come. Because if these resignations happen, even half of them, the Republican Party loses its majority in the House. This means Democrats could indeed immediately take over the speakership, delivering a humiliating defeat to Mike Johnson and stripping Trump of one of his greatest legislative power platforms. But the most interesting part is that this fear does not come from the Democrats, it comes from the Republicans themselves, mainly from those who realize that the party has fragmented into three blocs: radical pro-Trump members who follow any order, even if incoherent; traditional Republicans who want to save the party but don't know how to confront Trump; and the tired who see no purpose in continuing and are about to abandon Congress. And here comes the most explosive part, the one many are only now discovering, which changes the entire political landscape for the coming months. More than half of the Republicans about to resign have already admitted in internal discussions that they don't believe Trump can win the general election. They state that while Trump strengthens in the primaries, he weakens substantially in national elections, especially among independents, suburban voters, and young conservatives. And this coincides with another revelation by Puck News. Internal GOP polls show Trump as the candidate with the highest overall rejection rate since 1992, even surpassing George H.W. Bush in his historic decline. For this reason, some of these Republicans see their departure not just as an escape, but as a way to no longer support a political project they consider suicidal. One of them, whose identity was protected, said the most direct phrase about this entire crisis: "If we stay, we're just prolonging the agony. If we leave, maybe the party will finally face reality." This climate of frustration and internal chaos has another devastating effect. traditional Republican donors have begun suspending contributions, citing lack of leadership and long-term vision. They don't want to fund a party that only exists to pay Trump's lawyers, cover up scandals, or fuel internal wars. And this is where the real question arises. Did Trump destroy the Republican Party, or did the Republican Party allow Trump to destroy it? Because as much as Trump is the catalyst of the crisis, it was the Republicans themselves who for years fed the monster, gave in to fear, abandoned institutional responsibility, and handed everything over to the cult of personality. Now, with the collapse approaching, they try to run, but it's too late. The truth is, we are witnessing before our eyes the implosion of a historic party consumed by extremism, ego, and fear. And while this happens, American democracy continues struggling to survive the political earthquake this destruction will cause.
Marjorie Taylor Greene finally breaks her silence and reveals dark secrets Trump tried to hide before his departure. When this story began circulating behind the scenes in Washington, many thought it was just another chapter in the Republican Party's perpetual internal turbulence. But as new information emerged, especially after Marjorie Taylor Greene's interview on CBS's 60 Minutes with Lesley Stahl, it became clear that something much bigger was at stake. This was not a simple internal feud, nor just another rhetorical attack on Donald Trump. It was a structural rupture, a real split between one of the most aggressively pro-Trump figures of recent years and the very center of gravity of the MAGA movement. It was the kind of event that rarely becomes so public, so explicit, so exposed. At first, what drew attention was Marjorie's tone, more restrained, less performative, almost like someone who had passed the point of no return and realized she could no longer sustain the political mask she herself had helped build. She spoke about death threats, coordinated attacks, and the ways her private life had been put at risk. And although such narratives had appeared in internal disputes before, there was this time a crucial difference. She directly pointed to Donald Trump as responsible for mobilizing the radical base against her. That alone would have been explosive, but what came next made the situation even tenser. Before that, however, she recounted her entire trajectory within the MAGA movement, the battles fought alongside Trump, the absolute loyalty, the unwavering support in votes, speeches, and campaigns. She herself recalled voting with Trump on 98% of bills, never failing to defend his narratives, even in politically unsustainable situations. She also remembered making full contributions to the NRCC, working for years to reinforce Trump's political power, and in return, receiving threats, humiliations, and, according to her, institutional silence from her own allies. During the interview, she described a totally toxic environment within the Trumpist wing of the Republican Party. Aides ignoring risk warnings, congresspeople feigning solidarity but disappearing when action was needed, leaders downplaying assaults and insults, a structure that, in her words, only functions when it benefits a small group. She said she sent evidence of threats to her son to Kash Patel, J.D. Vance, Susie Wilds, James Blair, and practically no one responded. She began detailing a pattern of behavior growing in volume and consistency. The violence was not only coming from the radical base, but also from the active omission of leadership. As the interview progressed, Marjorie, consciously or not, painted a devastating portrait of the Republican Party's inner workings, a place where fear had replaced discipline, where loyalty to the leader mattered more than any institutional principle, and where questioning Trump meant immediately being targeted by the movement's most violent digital cells. It was not mere criticism, it was a public admission that the movement she helped build was ready to devour her. Gradually, what initially seemed like just a venting of frustration took on more serious contours. The Congresswoman reported that whenever she tried to expose cases of abuse, corruption, or sexual trafficking related to the Epstein case, she was treated as a traitor. Threats increased, internal pressure grew, and doors closed. At first, she spoke as someone trying to justify her decision to step away. But the main revelation, the one that would change the tone of the interview and place Trump and his allies in an extremely uncomfortable position, had yet to come. And every passing minute made the atmosphere heavier. Even journalist Lesley Stahl, known for her firm style, seemed to sense that something deeper was about to emerge. Marjorie spoke about how Republicans mocked Trump behind his back, laughing at his voice, his appearance, and his declining health. She spoke of hypocrisy, of how they only wore the MAGA hat when politically convenient. She spoke of silent betrayals, of hidden grudges, yet the most shocking elements remained carefully contained. Throughout the first 60% of the interview, it felt like Marjorie was preparing the audience, slowly paving the way for something she still hesitated to say, as if she knew that, once revealed, there would be no turning back, neither for her nor for the Republican Party itself. And then, just when when the conversation seemed to stabilize, just when everyone thought it was merely internal disputes and death threats, Marjorie finally began addressing what, according to her, truly explains the brutal rift between her and Donald Trump. And this is exactly the point at which the narrative ceases to be just another chapter of the Republican Civil War, and instead puts Donald Trump, his inner circle, and the entire MAGA movement under the most explosive accusation a former ally could make. At this point, Marjorie Taylor Greene not only exposes internal tensions, but makes accusations that shake Washington's political landscape. She claims that Donald Trump, directly or indirectly, is responsible for activating the radical MAGA base to threaten her life and her son's. She described the dialogue she had with Trump. "When you call me Marjorie Taylor Greene, you are activating your MAGA cells to threaten my son's life and my own. Can you stop?" The response she received was harsh, cruel, and disturbing. According to her, Trump not only reprimanded her, but also made comments she refused to repeat, describing them as extremely coarse and shocking. Even more serious, Marjorie revealed that Trump was allegedly willing to protect or even be part of a PPP, the so-called Pedophile Protection Program linked to Jeffrey Epstein's child trafficking network. "All I did was expose a pedophile trafficking network led by Epstein, and that's what made Donald Trump turn against me." Furthermore, Trump allegedly claimed that releasing certain files would harm powerful people, turning the victims into the guilty parties, or at least individuals who should be protected. This is the point at which the interview becomes explosive. Marjorie was not merely criticizing Trump for political decisions, but for protecting dark interests, putting her and her son's life at risk.
She continued detailing what she considered a betrayal of the America First principle. According to Marjorie, Trump's support for the cryptocurrency industry, his meetings with Crown Prince MBS, and the entire president's political agenda do not reflect the values he always promoted on the campaign trail. He can continue calling himself MAGA or whatever he wants, but he does not represent America First, she stated. For her, this reveals a deep contradiction between what Trump promises in speeches and what he does in practice, a difference that, in Marjorie's view, calls the integrity of the entire movement into question. The impact is not limited to personal or moral concerns. Marjorie explained how Republicans who support Trump ridicule him behind his back. They laugh at his appearance, his physical decline, and the way he expresses himself, yet they maintain superficial loyalty, using the MAGA hat when convenient, keeping up a facade of support to protect their own interests. They consider Trump repulsive and grotesque, but they agree with him because they believe this preserves power and ensures their political survival. The situation becomes even more dramatic when Marjorie describes how her reports of crimes and abuses were met with silence or hostility from party leaders. She stated that she sent proof and warnings to Kash Patel, J.D. Vance, Susie Wilds, and James Blair, and in most cases received no response. When Trump finally reacted, it was offensive and cruel, making it clear that his support for protecting powerful interests took precedence over protecting victims. Furthermore, Marjorie revealed that by supporting Epstein survivors and exposing abuses of teenage girls, she was labeled a traitor by the president himself. This moral shock led her to resign, asserting that she could not be complicit in cover-ups that put lives at risk. She said that from that moment, she began to realize the true scale of political betrayals within MAGA and how leaders she supported were willing to use political violence to silence her. She also detailed specific threats, pizzas containing personal information, bomb threats to her home and office, and direct threats to her son. When she alerted the police, the local FBI, and Republican leaders, the response was virtually non-existent. This combination of institutional negligence and activation of the radical base turned her situation into a struggle for survival, both political and personal. Marjorie did not stop there. She pointed out examples of how Trump allegedly favored billionaires and cryptocurrency donors at the expense of the American people. While billionaires received direct help, the American people are still waiting for concrete policies in health, education, and welfare. She noted that even with the passage of laws such as the Epstein Files Transparency Act, passed 427 to 1 in the House and 100 to 0 in the Senate,
Trump and MAGA allies would still try to delay or cover up essential information. The Congresswoman's account culminates in an accusation regarding the Republican Party's state of disintegration. She claims that leaders such as Kevin McCarthy and others are aware that the MAGA base is fragmented and that members are prepared to resign before the end of the term. According to her, up to 20 Republican representatives are preparing to announce retirement, and many MAGA followers see Trump as someone who no longer represents the values he once promised to defend. The Congresswoman concludes the interview with a clear critique. MAGA, in its current form, has failed to put the people's interests above personal or political gain. She describes a political machine that feeds on division, violence, and hypocrisy, and denounces that when someone stands against these practices, even a longtime ally, they are silenced, threatened, or turned into an enemy. It is at this point that the narrative reaches its climax. Marjorie Taylor Greene, until then a loyal Trump ally, presents herself as a warning voice, almost prophetic, regarding the contradictions and betrayals of the MAGA movement. Her accusations are not merely personal. They are a denunciation of the internal workings of a party she helped build. And with that, she makes it clear that the coming weeks could be decisive for Trump's political survival, the cohesion of MAGA, and the future of the Republican Party.
Shocking. Trump panicked, and the reason has just been revealed in the media. When we see this photo of Donald Trump at the bizarre Kennedy Center ceremony, it's hard to believe. He hosted the event last night, and it was a total failure. Trump even said something like, "Yeah, you can't see the audience right now with the streaming," but what was really happening while he was starring in this circus? In the U.S., layoffs are about to surpass even the numbers from the Great Recession. We've already lost 1.1 million jobs, a 54% increase from the previous year, and this number could reach nearly 2 million before the end of the year. Prices are skyrocketing. Americans are without health insurance, struggling to pay for housing, and Trump is on the Kennedy Center stage handing out medals to Sylvester Stallone and the band Kiss, while firing the entire board and appointing MAGA fanatics. Meanwhile, the world doesn't stop. War in Congo, Thailand, and Cambodia. Ukraine under Russian attack, killings in Gaza. But Trump's focus? Ensuring that the Oval Office is covered in real gold, not gold paint. While Americans starve and lose rights, he discusses metallic shine and the promised tariff rebate checks? Forget it. He won't deliver anything. The deficit explodes, trillions in debt are added, and he pretends he's rewarding the middle class. But it's all just spectacle, propaganda, and vanity. We also have international humiliation. Trump attacking Zelensky, claiming the Ukrainian president didn't read his peace plan. In reality, it was a Russian surrender plan delivered by his own team. Furthermore, the Trump administration supports far-right groups in Europe, trying to weaken NATO and divide the European Union, including parties like the AfD in Germany. In the U.S., young people are quickly turning away, net approval of -60%. Regarding refugee policy, he only accepts white South Africans. 97% of Americans disapprove. While Trump proclaims himself the winner of fake peace awards, we see the world in flames and America increasingly isolated. And this is exactly what the media has begun revealing now. Trump panicked, and the reason is no surprise to those who follow the behind the scenes. When we look at Donald Trump during that bizarre Kennedy Center ceremony, it's hard not to feel a mix of perplexity and concern. The photo that circulated last night shows a visibly out-of-context Trump trying to lead an event that was, in practice, a total failure. He said something like, "Yeah, you can't see the audience right now with the streaming," as if this justified the obvious lack of public attention and the chaos surrounding the ceremony. But while Trump tried to stay the center of attention, the country plunged into a crisis he simply cannot control. Yesterday, official data confirmed what was already expected. The number of layoffs in the United States is about to surpass the Great Recession and possibly even the COVID-19 pandemic. More than 1.1 million jobs have been lost, a 54% increase from the previous year, and this number could reach nearly 2 million by the end of the year. Meanwhile, inflation skyrockets, housing costs explode, health plans are removed from millions of Americans, and the population experiences firsthand the gap between reality and the spectacle Trump insists on presenting. While American citizens suffer, the world is also unsafe. Wars continue escalating in Congo, Thailand, and Cambodia. In Ukraine, the Russian invasion continues, and the conflict intensifies daily. In Gaza, killings persist without any effective action from the Trump administration. But he, distracted, organizes a ceremony where he fires the entire Kennedy Center board and replaces them with MAGA fanatics, handing out medals to Sylvester Stallone and the band Kiss. It's a show of empty power while the reality around him is suffering and chaos. Additionally, independent media trying to show the truth is under attack. The Midas Touch Network, known for exposing Trump's government contradictions, is being pressured and censored by the president's allies and outlets like Fox News. The channel is approaching 6 million subscribers, and it's essential that the public engage to continue exposing what mainstream media ignores: Trump's mismanagement and mental deterioration. During the ceremony, Trump displayed his evident fragility. Asked how he prepared for the Kennedy Center, he said, "I have a lot to do, and actually, I didn't prepare much. I read a little, but I have a good memory, so I can remember things." This kind of statement not only highlights his lack of focus, but also a distorted perception of the gravity of events around him.
The event was marked by bizarre statements about gold and gold paint in the Oval Office, as if the choice between real or fake gold were more important than the economic crisis, inflation, unemployment, and the growing national debt. Trump promised rebate checks that will never exist while spending trillions and increasing the federal deficit. His speeches on tariffs, dividends, and national security show a leader more concerned with appearances than reality. On the international stage, Trump also appears disastrous. He attacked Ukrainian President Zelensky, accusing him of not reading the peace plan Trump did not even have. What was presented to Zelensky was actually a Russian surrender plan manipulated by intermediaries close to Trump. The American national security strategy under his administration aims to dismantle the European Union, weaken NATO, and support far-right extremist movements in Europe, such as Germany's AfD. These are not theories, they are official directives. Domestically, rejection among young voters is alarming, a net approval of -60%, a devastating figure signaling that Trump is losing support among the future political leaders of the country. Regarding refugees, only 3% of Americans approve of Trump's policy, which prioritizes white South African refugees, completely ignoring the global humanitarian crisis and showing the president's racist and exclusionary perspective. Meanwhile, Trump continues focusing on irrelevant and bizarre narratives: Kennedy Center awards, media mergers favoring MAGA allies, and attacks on anyone exposing his incompetence. His obsession with controlling discourse and creating pro-regime media clearly indicates he has panicked. Why? Because he knows the truth is coming out, his young base is drifting away, the U.S. economy is collapsing, and the world faces new crises he cannot and will not address. It is shocking to see such a historically powerful leader, yet so fragile in terms of reality and empathy, completely losing touch with the gravity of events. Trump panicked, and the reason is clear. He cannot handle the truth, the economy, the wars, and the loss of international credibility. While he tries to maintain the appearance of control, the truth continues to spread, and his panic only grows.